I have come back on because I want to talk about seeing past flaws and speaking life. I know many of you know that I went live talking last time. I talked last time about seeing past flaws and speaking life. I'm doing that again now. What does love look like? In this live, I'm going to tell you a story about when my husband, Andrew, he was fully aware of my flaws, and he spoke to someone in response to them pointing out such an obvious flaw. We were engaged to be married when I was about 23 years old, just before I turned 24. And at the time, I was really struggling with something called cystic acne. It was all over my face. It was absolutely awful. It was just like all of these boils all over my face. It was red, it was swollen, it was actually painful, and it was so extreme. The flaw of my physical looks was so extreme. People actually pulled away from me as I came to give them a hug and give them a kiss. People physically recoiled from me. It was a very confronting time. I was going to be a bride in only 5 months, and I was struggling with this challenge that was all over my face. There was one woman who was a whole lot older than me. She, tried to make fun of it just lightly, but it hurt deeply. But one day over a cup of coffee, she looked at Andrew and she said to him, "How do you cope? How do you, you know, how do you manage with all of this stuff that's all over Beth's face?" And Andrew looked at her and he said, what are you talking about? I don't see what you're talking about. She's beautiful. She's beautiful. I love her. That comment I have carried over 30 years of marriage. We've been together for 35 years. I think Jesus is the same about his bride. I was Andrew's bride to be, and I think Jesus is exactly the same about his bride. It doesn't mean to say that we don't work on getting the obvious flaws in our life sorted out. It doesn't mean that we don't address them privately, but publicly. Andrew was, saying, I don't see any of it. And he still, he still says, with my little dot on my nose, he's still like, "You're beautiful," 30 years later. I mean, it's just, I know I got a good one, but I think Jesus is even a better one. He is our bridegroom, and he sees us without a spot and without a wrinkle. I know it says that he's going to have his bride without a spot or a wrinkle, but he sees us through what it is that he's already achieved. He sees us through the lens of love. And that's the same way that Andrew was seeing me, through the lens of love. He saw nothing wrong with me. He saw me only as his beautiful bride to be. So what does love look like? Well, I would say that's what love looks like. And I mean, if you have a read of 1 Corinthians 13, it's that really famous love chapter where Paul literally puts this big squishy love chapter about love does this, love does that. It doesn't, there's no envy. It doesn't, remember wrongs, all of that sort of thing. And on either side, the other chapters on either side. So you have 1 Corinthians 13, then you have 1 Corinthians 12 and 1 Corinthians 14 are talking about the exercise of the gift of prophecy. So what that is actually saying to us is Paul is highlighting, it's like a love sandwich, as Dan McCollum teaches, but it's highlighting that even though we're exercising all of these prophetic gifts, if it's not sandwiched with love, if love is not at the center of it, then it's just a resounding gong. And when we told that at 1 Corinthians 13 too, if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries, and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. I'm nothing. We are just noise if we are not exercising our prophetic gift or any of the spiritual gifts without love. And I'm going to keep on harping on about this. This is a real thing for me. I'm like a dog with a bone. It's like, this is what prophecy needs to look like. Anyway, 1 Corinthians 14:3 tells us, which of course that's a chapter that's talking about the exercise of gifts, especially prophecy. But the one who prophesies speaks to people, and I would add, speaks to people, places, or things for their strengthening, encouraging, and comfort. They are always looking through the lens of love. What does love look like? If you can only see the flaws in someone, and that's what you're going to be sharing in a prophetic word, then look beyond it and ask God, okay, I can see all of this that needs to be addressed in someone's life or in a region or in an organization. What do I do with this recognition of the flaw? Do I go public with it? Or do I approach people privately with it? Do I have the responsibility? Is it my sphere of influence? Do I have the right to speak into that person's life? Have they invited me to speak into that person's life? Do I love them? Do I love them? Graham Cook teaches so beautifully how he had a prophetic word and he didn't particularly like the person that he had the prophetic word for. He couldn't wait to tell this guy what that prophetic word was. And he was really, happy. The story is so raw and authentic. And what ended up happening was that God said, no, you can't tell him until you love him. You have to love them before you can prophesy to them. We don't have authority over an area or over a people or anything until we love them. I mean, I can't walk my streets where I live and start declaring and decreeing things if I don't love it. And I do love it. I think that God gives us a beautiful love, even though we can see all of the flaws. Even though Andrew could see the cystic acne, it actually hurt for me to smile. It was so bad. So even though Andrew could see the cystic acne all over my face, he didn't see it because he loved me. So he just called out the gold. And I think that it really stopped, it quietened that person who was drawing out this thing on my face that I was struggling with. I was struggling with people pulling away from me. It was a very humbling experience. Of course, Jesus tells us in John 3:17, after 3:16, after he says, God literally gives him, because he so loved the world, God gave his one and only son. But it reads, for God did not send his son into the world to condemn it, but to save the world through him. We are in a process of being saved, being sozoed over and over again. I'm sozoing, I'm healing this spot in my nose. That cystic acne was sozoed over time. And my beloved stood by my side and said to me, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful. I love you, I love you, I love you. And even though I didn't feel worthy of being told that I was beautiful, it helped me walk through that time of healing and that time of being rejected and things. So I think it really behests us to think about what does love really look like? I think that Andrew showed me love back when I was 23 years old as a young fiance who was about to be married to a man who I will do the next 30 years with. And he still looks at me, he's walked through with all sorts of lumps and bumps and hair falling out and hair growing back curly, even though it was straight originally, and spots and cuts and bruises. And he still says, you're beautiful. And Jesus says the same to his bride. So unless we can speak with love, unless we can speak with solutions, unless we can come alongside of people and say, I see you, I love you, and it hurts me to see this, but this is the solution. This is the solution. Only if we get given permission to speak into that area. Then if it doesn't resonate with love, if we're not resonating with love, we're a clanging cymbal. We need to stop speaking. The prophetic is undergoing a massive change. We are at a shift of eras. I mean, we've all heard it. The prophetic needs to change, to start to reflect the giver of the gift. And the giver of the gift describes himself as being love. If you've seen Jesus, you've seen the Father. How did Jesus treat the lonely, the abject, the bruised, the rejected? How did he treat them? It was only the highly religious ones that he criticized. And he actually said, you should be recognizing me, but because you're so puffed up, you can't receive me. So I just wanted to get on and just say, what does love look like? If you think that you've got a prophetic gift or even any other gift, word of knowledge gift, a healing gift, I mean, we've got them all. Whatever it is, if you can't carry out that gift and reflect the giver of that gift well, if you can't represent that giver of the gift well, and that giver of the gift is love, then I'd say stop, get back into the secret place, learn what he has to say about you, and then start to look at the world through the eyes of love. And then, only then, when it resounds with love, then speak. And if you do have authority to speak into people's lives around their issues and things like that, try not to do it harshly. I know for those of us that have been around the mountain a bit, it can be hard work because we're like, oh my gosh, could you just get with the program? But that's not how we need to come across, the same way that we shouldn't come across that way with our children as we're raising them. And I know that, you know, had Andrew done that to me about the obvious flaws all over my face before we got married, it didn't stop him from marrying me. It didn't stop him from seeing me through the lens of love. He just said she's beautiful. And I think that that's how Jesus sees us too. He sees the bride with all of her lumps and bumps. He's not silly, but he sees us with love. And I think that we need to start to look through the lens of love and look to one another through that lens. We are called to be seated in heavenly places with Jesus, but we are also in Jesus, and we must look through his gaze, look through his eyesight, look through how he sees it. And only then, when we are resonating with the heartbeat of love, only then speak. Anyway, just wanted to get on and share that insight. We'll catch you soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.